Richard Taschuti.
To sit here and hear everyone speak so convincingly just takes, there's nothing left to say. It's kind of like what my periodontist calls a slam dunk against fracking at this point. I have to quote someone who said, "No one should be allowed to ruin our water, air, food, and land." After a plethora of articles in the New York Times, and believe me, I was looking hungrily, all those articles were basically about fracking, but it was, will it pay? Are they misleading the investors? It seems like it might not be worth that much money. They never spoke about the environment until on November 20th in the Times Magazine, there was an article about sick people in Amwell, Pennsylvania. And that article was moving, very moving to me. And the word that stuck out in my head from that article was widget. They said, this is a widget industry, meaning, and we don't think of them as widget. They're big gas companies, but they're going to be watching every penny, is what the point the writer was making. They're going to be watching every penny. And so, you know, forget regulations. I mean, I could go through contamination by the watershed with the setback distance. The SGEIS has a review after 2 years. That makes one wonder why. 2 years later, will it be less contaminating? And then the second article that I had to be sort of bowled over by, but still not bowled over enough, was on November 25th, which was basically the scene in Albany. And it was like, the lobbyists have spent all this money, and only the environmentalists have spent $800,000. You know, they don't have as much. And it was kind of as if you waited for the writer to say, isn't this deplorable? But he didn't. And so I can't add too much at this point. And I just wanted to say, it can't be. It just can't be. There can't be fracking in this state. Thank you.
Thank you. Hillary Baum. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Baum, before you go, I think we're going to call up the last 5 speakers we're going to have for the afternoon session. So just give us a moment.
Okay, at this time, actually we have slightly more than 5, but we'll get as many in as we can. Jeanette Barth, Susan McDonald, Russell Mendel, Rita Gorman, Alan Bortnick, and George Lee.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Hillary Baum. I want to start off by saying that I'm a mother and a grandmother, and all my kids live in Philadelphia, and I have a great concern for their safety in terms of food and water down there. I'd like to thank the Department of Environmental Conservation for the opportunity to present this testimony and the opportunity to counter the barrage of industry advertising touting the environmental virtues of natural gas and the negligible effects of fracking on the rural landscape. In fact, fracking and farming do not mix. Fracking must be banned. I'm here representing the Baum Forum, a New York-based not-for-profit producer of conferences on critical food and farming issues. Our programs have reached thousands of food professionals, advocates, and the media. And as of last spring, when we did a conference on food and fracking, we also had many, many environmentalists be part of our audience. I'm also representing Chefs for the Marcellus, a campaign of chefs, restaurateurs, purveyors, producers, and others in food-related businesses who have organized to support our regional food shed and protect it from the threats of fracking. I'm a founding member of Food Systems Network NYC and a contributor to Christine Quinn's FoodWorks project. These organizations share the perspective that New York's regional farm and food economy generate urban and rural jobs and contribute significantly to the health and well-being of urban and rural communities. My passion and expertise is in the regional food movement, from the development of farmers markets and local food procurement for schools and restaurants to food processing, community-supported agriculture, and food systems planning. Fracking must be banned. Fracking and farming do not mix. It's clear to me and many others who have studied the problem that hydraulic fracturing poses an unacceptable threat to a huge portion of New York's agricultural heartland, to our fruit, vegetable, grain, dairy, and livestock farmers, our vintners, our brewers, our artisan food producers, their families, and their communities. Healthy farming needs abundant supplies of clean water, clean air, and clean soil. It needs land that is not fragmented by drilling pads, pipelines, and compressors. It needs a critical mass of acreage and farming nearby and the infrastructure that would accompany it. And it needs to be free of the stigma that may be attributed to food sourced from areas where fracking will take place. I'm speaking out because I believe that fracking is a threat to the gains that have been made over the last 35 years in building rural and urban business and cultural relationships around food and farming, relationships that our communities thrive on. How is that possible?
Thank you. Sorry, we're just trying to get to a few more speakers.
I just want to close by saying one thing. Actually, two things. Let us vow to protect our region's ability to produce healthful, beautiful food as climate catastrophes in farming areas right here in New York and in other parts of the country and throughout the world are shrinking food supplies. Let New York be the state where the absence of fracking adds value to living and working here.
Thank you. Paul Sheehan. Thank you very much.
My name is Paul Sheehan, and I'm a New York City resident, and I also own property in the Delaware River watershed.
A little closer to the speaker,
yeah,
to the microphone.
I'm vertically challenged the other way.
Can you pause the timer for a second?
Thank you.
Yeah, just give him Tom, just stop the clock.
I like what somebody said. I'll just add one aspect to what someone said about shale gas is not natural gas, it's unnatural gas. Because shale gas does not want to come out of the ground. It needs to be stimulated by injecting these millions of gallons of water and thousands of gallons of toxic chemicals to get it to come out. And of course, the gas companies know this, and that's why they had to pass the Halliburton loophole, so that we cannot scrutinize their chemicals and their process. And open the loophole. And so as part of this deceit and misrepresentation, they make a claim that hydraulic fracturing has a 70-year-old record, which is not true because the chemicals they're using were not used 70 years ago. This is very recent history. They've only been using these chemicals for 10, 15 years, which is why the loophole was only passed in 2005. That's, 6 years ago. And so the history is new. There has been no history of this toxic process. The history is being written now, and that's why we're finding out, people get sick, their animals die, water supplies are contaminated. So history is being written now, and also, like Joe, I'm an architect, and we pursue a similar standard that doctors do, which is do no harm. First, do no harm. And so if it's good enough for doctors, good enough for architects and engineers, it should be good enough for you. So please do your job. First, do no harm. We don't know the history. We know enough to know that this is not a safe process. And I have to say, when I got here today and saw all the DEC officers, patrolmen, I'm not sure what you call them. I said to Joe, wow, look at what's going on here. What do we need all these DEC police for? But then I looked at one of the cars, and it says on the side of their cars, report environmental crime. Well, we're here. We're reporting an environmental crime that will happen if you don't do your jobs.
Thank you. Jeanette Barth.
Is this going to work?
Yeah, it works. You're good.
My name is Jeanette Barth. I'm a PhD economist, and I have been conducting economic analyses and developing economic models for 35 years. The economic assessment conducted for the revised draft SGEIS is inadequate and unacceptable. Economic benefits are exaggerated and economic costs are ignored. There is extensive independent and academic literature that concludes that areas with extractive industries are economically worse off in the long run. Existing industries that are vital to the region, such as agriculture, organic farming, tourism, hunting, fishing, winemaking, and river and lake recreation, just to name a few, may be severely and negatively impacted. Such losses were not taken into account. Major food co-ops have stated that they will not buy produce from areas with hydraulic fracturing. And there will be a high cost if our agricultural lands and nearby water become contaminated with toxic or radioactive substances. Costs associated with the increased demand for community social services, police and fire departments, first responders, local hospitals, etc., must be estimated. A leaked New York State Department of Transportation memorandum provided estimates of truck traffic and costs, but even these costs were ignored. There was no attempt to measure public health costs. Research shows negative health impacts associated with shale gas drilling, and the public has repeatedly voiced such concerns. It is well known that extractive industries create a boom and bust cycle for communities. Why are the costs of a long-term bust not estimated in this assessment? Why was there no mention of the fact that banks may not issue mortgages on properties with or near a gas well, thereby negatively impacting property values and property tax revenue? Also ignored is the loss of future economic development potential after a spider web of pipelines is built, preventing future development. It is clear that E&E focused only on benefits, and the estimated benefits are exaggerated. Employment, income, population, and tax revenue projections are dependent on natural gas reserves and production assumptions. E&E has used highly exaggerated reserves, production, and average well life assumptions. Input-output analysis was used by E&E, and for reasons I have explained in various other reports, this technique is inappropriate in this case. Based on research and experience elsewhere, it is likely that the long-term net economic benefit to New York State will be minimal and possibly even negative. The only winners are likely to be the gas industry and a very few lucky landowners. The gas industry is lying to us in order to reap profits at the public's expense. Our own DEC should work to seek the truth, not simply working to facilitate the gas industry. One more thing, a proper economic assessment would be an expensive research endeavor, and it would require a team of qualified experts, each with specific expertise. The people of New York State and future generations deserve an unbiased and comprehensive assessment of what shale gas extraction might mean for our health, our environment, our quality of life, and our economy. If our political leaders do not insist on this, then they have failed all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan McDonald.
Thank you for this opportunity to express my concerns. Recently, I read a commentary by Jamie Kittman published in the New York Daily News Sunday, November 6, 2011. I've attached a copy of this for the report, but since he is a far better writer than I decided I will quote several sections below. But first, the following identifies the writer as the commentary. Kittman is a lawyer, and he is the New York bureau chief for Automobile Magazine. He touches on the two most important concerns from your report that I find: concern for our drinking water and for the oversight of the gas and oil industry as it plans to frack in New York. quoting the author now, "As a car writer who follows the gas and oil industry, I take a generally dim view of energy corporations. Years spent researching the petroleum business has taught me that America's energy producers have a history of evading the truth where matters of public health are concerned." And he goes on, and when I was asked to moderate a panel discussion among fracking experts from both sides that was recently held at the New York Policy Forum, I came to it with an open mind, prepared to hear how the shale gas industry might be allowed to begin drilling this year without destroying the land and ruining the public health. Here's what I learned about it can't. The reason is simple. There is not enough and never has been enough money or manpower to properly oversee fracking. This would be true even in a booming economy. He goes on to refer to the chemicals mix that is in the process and the fact that even the New York State DEC, does not know what is in the mix of this fluid. My concern is similar. If we don't know what is going into the wells, how can we protect ourselves from the effects of these chemicals? If the outflow is carcinogenic and has been identified, so then what's going in? He continues to quote, I continue to quote the author, "Actually, the biggest issue is not the fracking itself, it's what happens to those toxic chemicals after they have been used. How do you store them? How do they get swept up by storms and into rivers and lakes? Where do you dispose of them so the toxins don't leach into the water supply? How do you transport the stuff safely?" And he concludes, "There are other important arguments, including the sensible idea that our energy policy should be transition to green energy, not to double down on carbon fuels. And there are questions about protecting landowners from unfair practices and hidden mortgage rules once drillers are allowed on the lands. But for me, the main issue and the ultimate disqualifier is the cost of proper regulation in an industry with a track record that is, at very best, inconsistent. The sad reality is that fracking can't be attempted safely without heavy regulation. On this, no one on our panel disagreed, but we can't afford the regulation and the high degree of care required any more than we can afford the disastrous consequences of underregulation.
All right, thank you. Russell Mendel, please.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Russell Mendel. I am an organizer for Frack Action and WaterDefense.org. I live in Brooklyn, New York. About 2 years ago, I traveled to the Ecuadorian Amazon, where I saw the devastation of fossil fuel extraction. Over 20 years of drilling in the Amazon, families had their pure water poisoned to the degree where we had to go and build rainwater catchment systems for people so they could have clean water to drink. An epidemiologist in the area estimated that there was an excess cancer rate, death rate, of 1,229 people in an area of 100,000. The reason I bring this up is because twice in the last 6 months, I have traveled to Dimmock, Pennsylvania. And what I saw there was eerily similar to the type of devastation I saw in the Ecuadorian Amazon. What I saw there were families where bright, smelly, orange water came from their faucets and from their wells. What I saw there were families with health impacts, such as hives and skin lesions and constant headaches. What I saw there, I thought I would never see in the United States of America. What we are seeing now is a rush to drill when all over the country we have seen that this practice is not safe. So this December, we are going to be delivering our clean water to the people of Dimmock, Pennsylvania, who have no clean water to drink because this industry is going to stop delivering water to their homes. Today is the last day of water deliveries. After that, they have to go back on wells that has made them faint in the shower, that is so polluted that when they gave it to their dogs, the dogs vomited within an hour after drinking it. This is after filtration. Do we want to see this happen in our watershed? No. Do we want to see this happen all over New York State? No. We need a ban on fracking, Governor Cuomo. We need you to take leadership. We need you to stand up to the gas and oil industry and protect all New Yorkers. Protect New York, ban fracking now.
Thank you. Rita Gorman. Rita Gorman? Is Rita Gorman, is she here?
Here.
No?
Here.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. Go ahead.
Should I just pull this down? My name is Rita Gorman, and I'm a member of the Environmental Advocates of New York. Environmental Advocates has identified 10 serious flaws, thank you, in the draft environmental impact statement. Time does not permit me to go into the 10, so I'll just briefly mention a few, and I think a lot of it has already been covered. First, New York State isn't proposing to ban any chemicals, even those known to be toxic and carcinogenic. While the proposed public disclosure component has been strengthened, telling New Yorkers what toxic chemicals will be used is not the same as protecting the public from negative health impacts. Secondly, the preliminary draft allows drilling waste to escape treatment as hazardous waste, even if it is in fact hazardous under the law. This means fracking waste could be sent to treatment facilities unable to properly treat it, putting the health and safety of our waters and communities at grave risk. Third, the state proposes allowing sewage plants to treat drilling waste, even though such plants are not permitted to handle toxic elements in such waste, and even though the DEC itself has called into question New York's capacity and ability to treat fracking waste. Fourth, drinking water supplies would be inadequately protected. The preliminary draft increases buffers and setbacks from aquifers and wells. However, the protections are inconsistent and can be waived in some instances. All setbacks and buffers must be set to provide maximum protections that cannot be altered. Fifth, some fracking restrictions would have sunset dates. The preliminary draft proposes to place some areas of the state off limits to gas drilling, but upon closer examination, many of the restrictions have sunset dates, and some of the protective buffers only call for site-specific individual environmental review, rather than clear restrictions. In short, the benefits seem minimal and the risk seems high. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Gorman. Alan Bortnick.
I think you can all hear me without the mic.
No, sir, please use the mic for the court reporter. Thank you.
You want help holding it? Hold it?
No, it's going to be thrown away. Ronald Reagan taught me a lesson. 70% of the people in this country don't have better than a 5th grade education, and unfortunately, we have to speak to them. And more important are visuals. It's okay. This is a map of New York City. Nobody here has trouble seeing it. This is a map of New York State. You can find New York City on it fairly easily. I leave it for the committee. This is a map of the United States. I defy anybody to show me the fly speck on New York where New York City exists. Well, but at least you know the country. What we're facing is a very simple problem. We are fighting a battle against the companies.
Sir, could you address your comments?
Beg pardon?
Could you address the comments to me, please?
Yeah, we are fighting a battle against a bunch of regulations, words in effect. It is not words that matter, it is people. Most of what has been said here before, I'm going to repeat in a different fashion. Census tells us that there are about 20 million people living on the little fly speck of America. That is 1 out of every 15 people in this country. What is a human life worth? That is what the issue here is. It is not a question of regulations. You can argue regulations, be polysyllabic 7 days a week. It is not going to change the fact that Gasland showed us what tens of thousands of people are suffering, and that issue has not been addressed. Unless we go after the governor on the basis of what is a human life worth, forget the regulations. It's a question of yes or no on banning fracking. It's that simple. We either take a stand on that basis or we will lose the war, because the gas companies have spent what has been estimated at close to $500 million as against possibly $5 million that the people trying to fight and prevent this from happening have spent. You can't outspend them. I remind you that every single commercial you see for medical products, 20 seconds of the minute tells you about the product, 40 seconds, 2/3, tells you as a disclaimer what's going on. CCD, 3 words, can cause death, is in every commercial. And the same thing is true here. Where is the choice going to be made? Argue over the words in a document or argue over fracking? Thank you.
George Lee.
I'm going to assume this is the best for last.
Yep, you are the last.
My name is George Lee. I live in Syracuse, New York. I'm from upstate. I'm a landowner there. I have a Christmas tree plantation. I'm trained as a geologist. I graduated from Dickinson College and have spent most of my career in the development and protection of water resources. I do believe that safe and responsible gas field extraction and pipeline delivery is possible in New York State without suffering a degradation in the quality of life or the environmental impairment, including our water resources. This is the oil industry and gas industry in New York State has been here and it's contributing to our economy as we speak. The oil and gas industry delivers safe practices and is strongly focused on training its labor force and carrying out in an accident-free work manner. The industry employs many, many professionals, disciplines including engineers, scientists, and planners, and skilled labor across a diverse universe of skills. This is an American industry. It's powered with American ingenuity and executed by American workers. The industry prides itself in a safety record and a record of continuous improvement. I believe that the ongoing production in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio have proved this.
People, one second, Mr. Lee, please. Mr. Lee didn't boo all the other speakers that came before him. Show him a little bit of respect. Thank you. Come on, people.
I also believe that the guidelines, procedures, and regulations put forth by the New York State DEC, in part in consultation with other consultants, and including the New York State Geological Survey, will serve our state and deliver the necessary high standards for enduring the protection of our environment. Implementation would be best served, and these are a couple of recommendations. One, I believe that to do it correctly, we need to have a lead agency approach and make the regulation work most effective. Secondly, I do believe the setback requirements are important, and they should be looked at carefully. If there are new developments, they should be taken into effect. This is just good sense. Those that live here in New York State want their environment protected. Lastly, I'd like to close with saying that we should also think that each and every one of us has an opportunity to contribute to the success of this industry. And already the industry is listening to you and looking at ways that they can recycle the waste and reprocess the waste. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. That concludes the afternoon session. I declare this afternoon hearing closed. There will be another hearing in this room tonight, starting at 6 o'clock. Thank you all very much, especially the speakers who mostly kept to the 3-minute limitation. I really greatly appreciate that. Thank you.